good evening, good morning alike, and a global warm welcome to our fourth community design chat. So this has grown to be a full series, and I'm really excited to host this from Amsterdam as a designer and resident and community builder for the Design Lab. And I have the honor to host this series for the University of California Design Lab. And I'm with Michelle Fisher, who's right on time and joining us. We have a split screen today with two guests, so something that's very new. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Yulika, how are you?
Very good.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me. I know that we're going to be joined by my colleague Tekara soon too.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It looks like you're in a sunny spot. Is that true?
I am. I'm actually in what used to be the restaurant at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, where I'm a curator, and it's now been changed into a staging post. You can see all these amazing crates for artworks behind me. So no longer do we have people eating here because we can't open our restaurants right now.
Yeah.
And so it's a little quiet spot, but I also have the wonderful courtyard of the museum below me as well. So yeah, it's a nice spot to be in for a conversation.
I love the peek into your world, and it's a little bit more than voice on a podcast. I get to really ask you to turn around and show me your world. We're talking from different continents, and we'll be joined in a moment from Tekara Gainey from the Mother Care Coalition. And yeah, you're our fourth interview, our fourth chat, and yours fits really well in this series as one of designing for equity and so much more for inclusion. But what we try to cover in this series, I'm just opening the doors here, is urban design. We've had this design for equity. We're doing this now, design futures in a way. Maybe this will influence the future. I hope so. I hope this will lay out new ideas and collaborations. Ethics, possibly too, and health. So many overlaps here. And I see a request from, maybe Tekara's joining us shortly. So we'll split this three ways, but yeah, designing motherhood. Hi, Tekara.
Hey, Tekara, how are you?
Hi. Great. How are you all? So good to be here and to see your faces.
Yeah, now it's a party.
It's nice to see you in your element, Michelle.
Thank you. Nice to see you always.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm opening the door, like as if you came to my studio, as if you came to the Design Lab. So welcome. And I introduce myself sometimes as a systemic designer and researcher, but I want to hand it over to you to introduce yourself. So Michelle, go ahead.
Thank you. I always introduce myself by saying I'm riding on the coattails of Maternity Care Coalition on this one. So I'm a curator. I'm currently based in Providence. I work in Boston at the MFA. I've worked in museums for about the last 15 years, different ones in different places. And I work with living artists and designers most of the time. For Designing Motherhood, we're a really large team. And so I have my work wife and ride or die, Amber Winnick, who's a design historian too, and Juliana Rowan Barton, who's also a design historian. But we also work with many colleagues at Maternity Care Coalition, and I know Tekara is going to introduce what MCC does. They are the thought leaders and the partners for designing motherhood, as well as some wonderful funders like the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage and the Graham Foundation. So my role is really as a curator and a writer and a researcher, and the storytelling that can happen. I see Tekara's just jumped off, so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to introduce Tekara for her, because she should do that herself. But she is an amazing maternal and infant health specialist. She's a doula and lactation expert. She works for Maternity Care Coalition, who are an organization based in Philadelphia who've been serving that local community for over 40 years, making sure that people who are pregnant and their infants roughly up until the age of 3 can thrive, can get access to the services they need. So Tekara, I'm going to hand over to you. I was giving a tiny little bit of a background to MCC, but you can do it a lot better than I can.
It might be.
Oh, maybe, you know what? I'm going to, Tekara, can you hear now?
Yes, I think it's moving again.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. I was saying you're an amazing doula and lactation
I don't know.
expert.
My connection is...
Damn, can you hear me now? I'm going to see when you can hear me, Tekara, I'm going to stop talking because I want you to be able to introduce yourself. But yes, MCC, I can see Imani in the chat saying it's a really great organization. It is transformative in terms of the work that it does. And really our partnership between Designing Motherhood and MCC is thinking about the work that MCC does as design. It changes people's lives at the city planning level, at the domestic level. It advocates for many different things, for the rights of pregnant people and their infants across a really broad spectrum. And so it's work that is often under-celebrated and unseen, but incredibly important in terms of thinking about some of the most vulnerable people in society and some of the most underserved populations too. Tekara, can you hear now?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I can hear you much clearer now. We have to love technology, right? Love digital platforms. When they work, it's great. When they don't work, it's a headache.
That is so true. So Tekara, I just told everybody a potted bio of you and MCC, and I said how wonderful you were, the work that you've been doing with MCC, what MCC does a little bit, and also the fact that you, along with 3 other colleagues, have been advisors who have led us in the Designing Motherhood project.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for taking that on and saying those nice words about me. I echo all of them about you, Michelle. But for like a formal introduction, hi everyone. My name is Tekara Gainey. I am a doula, a childbirth educator, reproductive justice advocate, advisor on the Designing Motherhood advisory team, and a program associate with the Maternity Care Coalition Community Doula and Breastfeeding program. And, you know, I'm so honored to be here to speak to the work that Maternity Care Coalition, MCC, does. That is a mouthful, so I'll say MCC. The work that we do with community, for community, since the 80s, 1980s, since then serving over 140,000 families, really to just meet people where they are so that they can parent and birth, you know, with dignity and autonomy. And that's really the goal of the organization.
So yeah, this is wonderful. Welcome and thank you. We're talking today about designing motherhood, and your website really puts it so poignantly, saying it's a first of its kind consideration of this arc of human reproduction from the lens of design. So there's not a ton of books on this, like Designing Motherhood, the shelf is full. No, it's almost like this book, Design of Childhood by Alexandra Lange. I'm like,
which we love.
Yeah, childhood is designed and motherhood is designed. So for me, that was like the moment I saw your visual research library on Instagram. I'm like, I was hooked. I was pulled in because it moves me both to the positive. Yes, those products are good, and your 80 icons in the book, they're product design. You focus on objects more, but some of them are just terrible or horrific, and so it really covers the emotional spectrum. But yeah, how can you introduce the topic of designing motherhood for anyone who's new to it, or for anyone who is deep into it?
Absolutely. So it's a lot of things. It's an exhibition, or 2 exhibitions actually, in Philadelphia at the Mutter Museum. It just opened in May, and at the Center for Architecture, it's opening in September of this year. It's a book which has over 50 different contributors, artists, and authors. It is an Instagram research feed, so you can find us at Designing Motherhood on Instagram. It's a design curriculum, so it's coming into UPenn's design studios, but it'll also be an open source set of resources that can be shared. And really, as it says, as you said so beautifully, Yulika, it is looking at the arc of human reproduction through the lens of design. It's a place that actually has had some sustained scholarship, interest, people looking at it. Alexandra Lange is one of our patron saints. She actually made one of the introductions to the book. Erica Chidi is another of those patron saints in terms of writing the prologue for the book, the co-founder of Loom in Los Angeles, a really amazing birth and reproductive wellness space. And the other patron saying we should talk about design historian Juliet Kinchin, who was my teacher in Glasgow when I was 19 years old, ended up becoming a curator at MoMA and did the Century of the Child exhibition and Counterspace and other material culture shows like that. So it's not a story, and goes the same for so many topics. It's not a story that hasn't been talked about. It's a story that people who are in decision-making places, whether they are directors of exhibitions who get to decide what goes on display or what doesn't, publications, houses, other places that can control and gatekeep what stories are told and who tells those stories. Those are people who are often, though hopefully this is changing, those are people who maybe haven't had to deal with lactation before, haven't had to deal with workplace discrimination because of pregnancy, haven't had to deal with reproductive rights, and haven't had to think, where can I get the services that I need to make the choices I need to make around my body? And so designing motherhood is really looking at, as you said, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the designs that have really, really changed our worlds and have done so really thoughtfully and intentionally. And I would argue what Tekara does day in and day out in terms of arming, birthing people with the knowledge and the support and advocacy that they need is a design. And then things like the Dalplan Shield and IUD, which affected over 2.5 million women. And there's Portia Holland, who's another amazing doula and lactation consultant and just overall leader in the maternal health space. So that's what designing motherhood is for me. But Tekara, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything you just said, but, I really do think it's about including that kind of intersectional social justice lens to the work that has been done and continues to be done, and looking at design in a very innovative way. The people on the grounds, the granny midwives, the grand midwives, the doulas, the birthing people, their families, they in and of themselves are part of that design. And so kind of refiguring how we define design and who tells those stories. So I think that's really part of what's so important about this project is we are putting a new voice, a new light to that. And reimagining what reproductive design could be if we invite and make space at the table for the people that needs to be at those tables.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up intersectionality. It's almost like hard to look at something mono these days in general in design. So really crossing it with diversity, with racism. My last chat was with Inclusion First project. So really that's that's part of it too, where just what the vision that you two have. Are you designing it, or are you researchers? Are you community builders? Give me a little bit of like of an angle, because designing is a very active word. So how are you two designing motherhood right now? And I know that's like maybe an unexpected question, but how do you think you are designing it as we speak?
As a curator, I'm a platform maker. I'm a facilitator. And so I'm not a designer, but I should create space for, if I'm doing my job correctly, should create space for folks like Tekara, who are designers of the world around us. And so my job is to help story tell, or to make space really actually for Tekara and others to tell their stories. Tekara, I think of you as a designer, but I don't know if you think of yourself as that.
When you, in the traditional sense, probably not. But I think when we have these conversations, right, it's like, yes, what I'm doing is that's badass. That is design. That is innovative. That is something that is transformative, and it's changing the way it's causing a paradigm shift, when it comes to how we view reproductive health and wellness. So before I would not consider myself a designer, or the people that does the type of work that I do as designers. But the fact that we are using, a radical approach of, meeting clients where they are, of ensuring that people have autonomy and agency in how they approach decision making and curative treatments, and even communicate with their providers, set a plan for, how they're going to parent, and or through their parenting heal, trauma, heal generational wounds. That's design. More than we can even speak to or articulate about in an academic sense. It's design and practice, right? So sometimes there's a disconnect between theory and practice, but I think what we're trying to do with the Designing Motherhood in a partnership with MCC is to fuse those two so that there is no longer that disconnect between theory and practice, and you're seeing what this looks like in lived experiences when it's embodied by individuals. And another way I think of myself as a designer is that I'm designing new systems. I think we operate in the system, we operate in institutions, and so the way that we're approaching this work, this kind of radical approach, this intersectional approach, it's in the way kind of disrupting a system that is rooted in oppression, that's rooted in racism, that's rooted in, patriarchal systems, to create something anew, something more equitable. And so creating equity is part of that design as well.
Amen, 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 amen.
Put.
Yes, everybody, everyone who is designing in whatever area of design, I feel like should probably shadow you and Portia on your jobs, Tekara, to understand what it is to really design for equity and with empathy, because if that was part of design education, I think it would work out a lot differently for us as we are designing or using the products of that research and implementation.
Yeah, you or maybe it's approaching it from different ends. Some people with the formal education going into community, and it seems like you're immersed in community, in the systemic thinking, which is, I think, also bubbling up more, because systemically approaching it is lasting longer. Anyone who's watching this, and I see there's really active community waving, giving us high fives, ask questions. We can see your questions, and we're happy to answer them live now or later. So this is an invitation to speak up. I would love to give you the mic. Here's someone asking about the Latin community. So that's a good question. Is will there be also a certain branching and off, or more focused, Tekara? Maybe
I don't know if you heard that question, Tekara, but I'm asking if the provisions for MCC, asking if provisions for MCC are also for Latinx communities. And I think really MCC works with and for and meets people across a broad range of spectrum, and so it's not for any one racial or cultural background, but really meeting need where it is. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. For sure. I think, MCC, our work really is rooted in historically marginalized communities. So that includes communities of color, immigrant communities, communities that have historically been in poverty. Unfortunately, that is a lot of Latinx communities, Black communities, and other communities of color. So we absolutely, our work crosses all that range. We have a wide range here in Philadelphia where we're based. We have a good amount of Asian Pacific Islander community, a lot of Cambodian communities, Black community, African immigrants, Caribbean immigrants, Mexican, South American. So we see it all. And our goal is to really fill the gap of where some of the resources lack those people.
So that sounds like a clear yes and yes and. One question I have, in your work, in the design research or the research and the curating, or in your community work in the different city, what are deterrents, or what are things that are obstacles in your way that you can describe as maybe even constraints, challenges?
Oh, I'm smiling. Yulika, what are the deterrents? Well, so the deterrent is that care work and maternal health is not prioritized and funded better, that care work is not paid a living wage, it is not valued socially, and so it does not support the people who are designing and implementing it. It also, when you try to tell these stories, there are large social taboos over people having bodily agency and advocacy for their own choices. And so, for example, when we tried to get Designing Motherhood as part of some of the major museums that I have worked for, to try and get the book, to try and get the exhibition, other things, we were told, fascinating idea, but no thank you, or interesting, who would your audience be? Which we replied to, well, literally everyone, because everyone is born, right? It's a women's issue was often another refrain, and we were like, that's bullshit. It's everybody's issue, because equity matters to everyone. We are not free individually until we are all free and supported. But I think one of the major obstacles and deterrents really has been those social taboos and stereotypes, where we can brush this aside because those who are often in positions of privilege and positions of decision-making power don't have to first-hand experience this, or even second-hand experience or third-hand experience many of the things that we talk about, either as designed objects that Amber and I and Juliana and others are writing about from a historical point of view, or Tekara and her colleagues are really in the weeds with and living on a day-to-day basis as they go and serve communities. So it will take a large sea change. And I think that's not just about changing people's minds, but changing the people who are in power. And so that is a political office, that is an institutional office, that is in so many different places, saying that there has to be, and Tekara said it best earlier on, a range of people at the table, a range of people in decision-making places, so that a range of lived experiences can help shape what matters in terms of policy, advocacy, storytelling, and our histories and our lived experiences now to reshape what can happen in the future.
Yeah, you tell a little bit about that in this YouTube video that's about the Mütter Museum talk, and it's a 20-minute free resource, and how you were turned down by the prominent museums because they question whether this matters or how might this possibly matter. So that's prejudice and stereotypes. Tekara, what can you bring up as examples of obstacles, hindrances that in your work?
Oh goodness, there's a few. I think one of the more challenging ones is just the structures and systems in which we're working, and I think, you know, there's no surprise that, and I think everyone knows this, especially now when we have such high name, you know, individuals in the media that are sharing their birth stories and their parenting stories, just about the maternal mortality crisis in the U.S. and how Black and brown women have a higher mortality rate than white women, you know, are dying in childbirth 3 times or 4 times higher than that. And, you know, I think the low hanging fruit, and it's easy to dismiss that as, oh, okay, that's racism. We don't know what to do about it. So what else can be done, right? But racism is rooted in structural practices. So when you don't have access to affordable housing, when you don't have access to quality education, when you don't have access to quality healthcare and clinics due to those structures that were in place because of racism and how they impact communities and healthcare and treatments and things like that, you're going to continue to see these effects. And I think what happens with organizations such as Maternity Care Coalition, doing the work that we're doing, individuals like myself who are birth workers and doulas, you know, a lot of the burden to address those issues falls on us. We can't change systems by ourselves. We're individuals. We can't do that, you know? So it's really going to take a concerted effort with policymakers, with philanthropists, with academics, with curators, right? Like Michelle, conversations like this with you, Yulika, to really, you know, band together and get that community power and address policy and address institutional systemic changes so that the lived experiences of people aren't as tragic as they are right now.
So you're reminding
us. With that also comes like licensing, right? Licensing and legitimacy with this type of work, right? It's, you know, you're in Amsterdam, Netherlands, is that right? No issue, right? To have licensure for midwives. That's not a thing. That's very common. Right? That's not a thing here in the U.S., right? It's very difficult to have licensure for direct entry midwives. And same thing with doulas, right? They're not seen as a necessary part of the healthcare team. And so addressing some of those, you know, structural issues are also problematic.
So there's a lot of gatekeeping with licensing, with policy making. So you bring up the power of many instead of the power of one. We in ourselves are powerful, but aggregating and stirring up a movement seems to be what you're with this challenge really called for and hope for. I hope this is trickling out too. Thank you.
Having that ripple effect.
Yeah, the ripple effect. May I ask you, and maybe I'd start with you, Tekara, on this one. How does this topic connect to you personally? And feel free to share as much as you want, but maybe it's a 9-to-5 passion, or maybe there's a story or something about you as a person that makes you really motivated for this topic. Maybe even an anecdote. Is there anything where that's eye-opening for us?
You know, I've always had an interest in maternal health. I've always had an interest in birth work. I remember my earliest memory, I was like maybe 5 years old, and I would like just go up to strangers who were pregnant and just like put my hands on their bellies and say, what's happening in there? You know, I was so amazed by it, just amazed by what the human body can do. And so, you know, just I took that interest and amazement into my academic career and, you know, studied anthropology. And in my studies, I was having my own personal experiences navigating my healthcare as a Black woman, as a queer identified Black woman. And the communication I would have with my providers left me feeling, you know, worse than when I entered the space. You know, I said, this isn't how my engagement should be. No. Right. And so I had an opportunity to witness a few births by shadowing doctors, because I thought, you know, that was the route I wanted to go in, by taking my, you know, curiosities as a kid and harnessing that over the years. I thought I was going to enter into the healthcare field, you know, as a provider. And so I had an opportunity to shadow doctors, and it was an amazing, beautiful, miraculous experience. But I also witnessed what I didn't have the term for it then, but now I know it was obstetric violence. You know, I saw a lot of that playing out. For a variety of factors, right? The community I was in, the hospital I was in, it was an urban teaching hospital, primarily seeing, you know, Black and brown patients with state-funded healthcare. So a lot of that played a factor, just the way the communication was being delivered. And I said, this is not right. This can't be how it goes. No. So I used my academic background in studies and got into doula work, right? So seeing doulas and the work that they were doing as ancestral practices, it was traditional. It was very personal for me to do that. But the space I was in as a doula, I was one of the only doulas of color. And so in that experience, I said, well, wait a second. I know Black and brown people are having babies. Why am I the only one of that background, of that culture in this space, right? And so from that experience, I really did as much as I can to connect and build community with people, to really speak to the notion of doula work, birth work as ancestral work, as supporting families and meeting parents where they are, and seeing the parenting journey as transformative, and seeing the way that, you know, intersectional identities and other social determinants of health impacted that pregnancy and parenting experience, and how sometimes that is unique to different cultures and different backgrounds. And so being able to live that experience and be culturally congruent to that really speaks a lot to me. And I'm very proud to be able to bring that to my team on Designing Motherhood and my team with Maternity Care Coalition. That's really what we're focused on, bringing the lived experiences from the staff, right? That cultural congruency into the communities, meeting people where they are and being able to help them parent and guide in the way that they need to, and seeing parents and families as the expert in their own health.
I so appreciate you opening up from age 5 on your own development in this. And this, I couldn't find this on a website. I couldn't find this anywhere accessible from the Netherlands. So now we captured this, and anyone, I think I'm lit. This was definitely motivating and connecting, and also totally relatable. it makes sense that you said, wait a minute, and wait a minute. Like there was moments where you're like, no,
Right, yeah.
how was it for
You
you,
don't have the
Michelle?
terminology for it at times, right? But
But
then, the more you navigate, you're like, oh, that's what that is. Okay, now I can identify. See, that's where the fusion of theory and practice comes into play,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, now I have a theoretical concept to put on this lived experience that I'm having. Yeah.
Yeah, let's throw this over to we can go a little bit over, and we must. Michelle, tell us a little bit where this connects to you as a person.
Sure, yeah. So, much like Tekara, I loved kids. Actually, it wasn't so much pregnant people, but maybe kids from a very young age. I was a babysitter and then a nanny for a really long time during graduate school. I also was pursuing a career that had me working 18, 20 hours a day, maybe 6, 7 days a week.
Wow.
And I was at MoMA as a curatorial assistant about 7 years ago. And I looked around me and I realized that I didn't know anyone who had kids in my job. Maybe they had kids, but they never talked about them in the office. They never were seen. But most of the women who were my mentors or my peers didn't have children. And it was because of a sort of knotty intersection of many different issues: lack of paid family leave, the devaluation of care work, the career break that can happen, especially for people who are the birthing person in a situation like that. And it really piqued my interest. I come from Scotland, where education and healthcare are free. And so I'd come with this amazing privilege and this very different background to come to the US 15 years ago. I came from a family where I'm the first to graduate from high school. My mom didn't get the opportunities that I did. And so I felt very interested in having watched her work in not very great jobs for most of her life, and having the possibility to be in control of my career, to be in control of my finances, to be able to set my course, but at the cost of being able to it really isn't possible to do both in many ways in this country, especially in a career that demands a lot to be able to get the very few curatorial jobs there are here. And so that was when Amber and I started talking, because she was a design historian who, graduating from her master's, had graduated and was pregnant at the time, and then realized that it would not be possible for her, within the strictures that she had, being a mother, to devote 20 hours a day to a curatorial job. And so there's a happy medium. It can be designed and it can be changed, but it was there that really it became personal for me, because I'm now 39. I don't know if I can have kids anymore. We hope, but it really has become something that I see as deeply connected to the work I do, the workplaces that I'm in, the politics that we are within, a really holistic conversation that affects every single part of our lives and can be done differently. I know it can, because I come from a country where it is done differently.
Yeah, so you bring in a cultural perspective in comparison, and this almost opens the idea also of undesigning. If something has been designed in very hostile, non-inclusive, non-communal way, how can we undesign it or steer the rudder the other way?
Elect more women to office, elect more people who actually have these issues to office, elect more women of color. Like, we don't just need a VP, we need a president, we need a secretary of state, we need a department of, we need a healthcare. Like, everybody, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a great quote, God bless her soul, she said, she was asked at one point in time, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? And she said, when there are 9, i.e. when everybody is a woman, then we'll have enough women on the Supreme Court. I'm not kidding. Like, if we were to undesign things, yes, we need to really pull away and to think not just about gender, to think about endemic racism in this country, as Tekara has said too. It's about thinking through across many different intersections, disability too, which I think is so often ignored in conversations around design. Socioeconomic background, I grew up with not very much. And when you don't have money, you don't have choices. And that's so true in this country where healthcare is not a human right. It's something that you pay for. So yes, let us undesign. And I think that's, again, it's really at the macro level of politics, and about being able to think about our worlds as constructed by these people and these policies.
That is a great closing sequence and word, and I can only close the spaces and saying thank you very much for your half hour of time in different places across the time zone. Anyone who watched this and wants to share this will be recorded shared so you can forward it. It can spark a conversation, maybe even with people who hold a different opinion and people that are empowered, people that are really change makers. So one question would have been, what kind of help are you hoping for? But you're really making very concrete and very inspirational suggestions already in this. Ask
Yulika, if we can just say to end with what help are we asking for? Fund MCC, like fund them. If you are a philanthropist, fund MCC and teach this.
How much do you want?
We would like $1 million. That would be transformative in terms of unrestricted funds for MCC. So please fund MCC philanthropists. This is the kind of change-making work that you can do for an organization like this, for people like Tekara who are amazing and doing this work every single day, and for designers and design faculty in particular. Teach this stuff in your course. Make sure these are conversations. Buy the book if it's useful. We'll give it to you if you can't afford it. Like if you're students and you want to get in touch with these conversations, our door is always open. But think about this as a place where you as design faculty and students can make a real difference in terms of what you teach, what you set your considerable resources and minds to.
That is super concrete, super to the point and button. I will hope this will be taught sooner than later. I'll try to activate my network in the ways that I can. And thank you very much. Just to honor your time, we'll wrap this up.
Thank you.
Conversation continues. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.